They had no idea who they were dealing with when they tried to play you. When the narcissist thought they could twist your mind, dim your spirit, and control your emotions, they truly believed their games were genius. They assumed you would stay confused, stay loyal, stay trapped in the web they spun with charm, manipulation, and false promises. They believed you were too empathetic, too trusting, too forgiving to ever see the truth behind their mask. But what they didn't realize is that every lie they told, every moment they gaslit you, every time they tried to rewrite your reality, they were exposing themselves. Narcissists never understand this. When you try to break someone who is genuine, someone who loves deeply, someone who gives without hidden motives, you don't just hurt them, you reveal your own emptiness. You show the world the hollowness behind your smile, the cracks in your illusion. At first, they felt powerful. They thought they had you under control. They believed they had won because you questioned yourself, because you stayed silent, because you tried to fix what they kept breaking. But the thing about manipulating a good soul is simple. You don't walk away untouched. You lose the very supply you depended on. You destroy the only person who ever saw you as more than your ego. You survived their cycles. You endured the confusion. You walked through the emotional storms they created. But they remained trapped in the same empty patterns, chasing the next person to drain, chasing the next life to feed their fragile ego. They thought you would stay down. They thought you would never see your worth. They mistook your patience for weakness and your kindness for blindness. But you were never blind, just hopeful. You were never weak, just caring. You were never theirs to control. You were simply giving them a chance they never deserved. And now they watch you rise, not with bitterness, not with revenge, but with clarity, with strength, with a peace they will never know. You broke free, and they stayed exactly where they've always been, behind the mask they can't live without. They see you rebuilding, rising, healing into someone they never imagined you could become, because their vision of you was always limited by their own ego. Narcissists can't see past themselves. They only saw you as a resource, a supply, something to drain. But now they see what you were all along: irreplaceable, rare, deep, and genuine. They didn't just lose a person, they lost the one person who gave them the kind of love, loyalty, and emotional depth they will never encounter again. And here's what torments them now. They didn't manipulate someone ordinary. They tried to manipulate you, and that is the source of their downfall. The damage narcissists cause doesn't end when the moment passes. It echoes. It rewrites their own identity. At first, they suppress the truth. They tell themselves you were too sensitive, that you expected too much, that you misunderstood them. They invent entire stories to justify their cruelty, but those lies don't hold forever. Reality creeps in the same way it always does, quietly, ruthlessly. It whispers when they're alone, when the mask slips, when the room goes silent. It hits hardest when they see you thriving, not in spite of them, but because you escaped them. What narcissists never understand is that manipulation is an irreversible exchange. They traded your authenticity for their ego, your loyalty for their insecurity, your trust for their temporary sense of power. In doing so, they curse themselves with the very emptiness they tried to project onto you. You rebuild slowly but surely. They unravel quietly and inevitably. You didn't seek revenge. You didn't try to expose them. You didn't sink to their level. You let life take care of the accounting. And life has a brutal way of settling scores. What they poured into the world, gaslighting, deception, emotional sabotage comes back to them slowly, methodically, relentlessly. They end up living inside the very chaos they created. Their collapse is never loud at first. Narcissistic decay starts privately. Relationships begin to fall apart. People stop trusting them. Patterns repeat. They become strangers to themselves because you cannot build a meaningful life on the foundation of selfishness and manipulation. And maybe they smile in public, maybe they laugh louder than anyone else, but there's a hollowness behind it now, a recognition, a shadow. They know what they did, they know what they lost, and there is no path back to what they destroyed. That's the curse of narcissistic abuse. Once they lose a truly loving soul, they never truly recover. But you weren't destroyed. You were transformed. You carry scars, yes, but they're reminders of your strength, your clarity, your awakening. You didn't retaliate, you elevated, and that rise is the punishment they never saw coming. Let them live in the world they built. Let them drown in the silence that follows the exit of the one who once loved them with sincerity. Let them feel what happens when a narcissist loses someone they never deserved in the first place. Because their manipulation wasn't just a mistake, it was a revelation of who they truly are, and a confirmation of who you were all along. And now, as you continue to grow with peace, with discipline, with unshakable self-worth, they watch from a distance that will never close. Narcissists always believe they can return whenever they want, but not this time. Not with you. They had no idea that trying to control you would become the very thing that exposed them, but now they know. When a narcissist manipulates someone genuine, they don't just hurt that person. They destroy the last real connection they'll ever have. They think it's just a moment, a slip, a tactic they can justify. But emotional abuse isn't a single act. It's a fracture in their own identity, and it spreads inside them, quietly poisoning everything they touch. Because you cannot manipulate someone else without betraying yourself. The psyche knows, the conscience knows, even if they bury it under arrogance, under excuses, under fake confidence, it lingers, it festers, it waits for the quiet moments when their mask falls. They told themselves they were justified. They said you were overreacting, too emotional, too intense, too loving. But those are the stories narcissists use to run from the truth. The truth that they violated something sacred and will never get it back. There is always a price, a steep one. And narcissists never understand that while they were busy trying to break you, they were slowly dismantling themselves. Manipulating someone who loved them wasn't a victory, it was the beginning of their psychological unraveling. Life only has meaning when it's rooted in honesty, humility, and responsibility. Narcissists abandon all of that. They sacrifice integrity for ego. They sacrifice connection for control. And the chaos they create eventually consumes them from the inside out. They distract themselves with noise, with people, with attention, with shallow validation. But late at night, when everything turns quiet, reality shows up. They remember your kindness, your patience, your loyalty. They remember how you cared when no one else did, how you gave what they never deserved, and then they remember what they did in return. That kind of guilt doesn't sleep. It sneaks into their new relationships. It poisons their ability to connect, because deep down, they know who they were with you and what they are without you. They know they're capable of destroying the best thing they ever had, and that knowledge corrodes them, slowly, quietly, permanently. You healed, you grew, you confronted every wound they created, and you rose. But narcissists, they remain prisoners of the very behavior they refuse to acknowledge. Their conscience doesn't let them go. Their patterns don't let them grow. Their ego doesn't let them evolve. Something in them died the day they tried to dominate you. Something honest, something real, something human. And no amount of validation can resurrect what their ego killed. That is the lasting cost of narcissistic abuse. It's not only about what they did to you, it's about what they did to themselves. They fractured their own character. They undermined their own identity. They taught themselves that hurting someone kind is acceptable. And once you do that, you lose the ability to build anything meaningful. The deeper torment belongs to them. They know what they threw away. They know they chose selfishness. They know they lost someone who truly cared. And no matter how they spin the story, no matter who they blame, that inner voice never stops whispering, "You did this. You lost them. You will never get them back." So yes, you were hurt, you were wounded, but you healed with dignity, you rose with clarity. They, on the other hand, are left standing in the ruins of their own behavior. They thought your kindness meant weakness. They thought your empathy meant submission. They thought your patience meant dependence. They misunderstood everything. They thought your silence meant weakness. They thought your patience meant you were powerless. They believed you were too afraid to speak, too fragile to stand up, too naive to see through their manipulations. But what they never understood and may still not fully grasp is that you weren't weak. You were strong in ways their ego could never comprehend. Strength doesn't always roar. It doesn't need to explode in anger or lash out with vengeance. Real strength, the kind that is forged in self-respect, discipline, and clarity, often appears calm, composed, and unshakable. And that was exactly what you had. A strength that didn't panic, that didn't waste words on someone who would never truly hear them. They assumed you were easy to manipulate because you didn't react to every insult, didn't fight every slight, didn't beg for recognition. You gave them space, not because you were blind to the red flags, but because you hoped they might show character, that they might prove capable of honor. And that restraint, that grace made you dangerous in the quietest, most dignified way. Your silence was never consent. Your patience was never surrender. You were watching, listening, taking stock, letting their true nature reveal itself. Over and over they failed. And yet you remained kind, not blind, not naive, not weak, but unwilling to allow their toxicity to harden you. That takes real power. Not the power to destroy, but the power to remain whole, centered, unshaken, even in the presence of someone trained in manipulation. And when you finally walked away, when your silence became distance, they didn't know how to react. People who thrive on control and emotional exploitation panic when their target finally detaches. They're used to extracting drama, feeding off reaction, but you gave them none. You gave them space, and in that space, you let life do the work. The weight of their own choices became theirs to bear, far heavier than any argument, confrontation, or reasoning could ever be. They underestimated the damage of your silence, not the silence of indifference, but the silence of someone who has seen the truth, accepted it, and chosen to preserve themselves. That kind of silence is decisive. It is calm, controlled, and final. It's the storm settling within you, the realization that dignity and self-respect matter far more than proving a point. Anyone can shout when they're hurt. Anyone can lash out in anger. But it takes an entirely different kind of strength to feel everything, the betrayal, the manipulation, the gaslighting, and still choose not to become bitter. That was your choice. To rise, not rage, to be better, not broken. They thought they had defeated you. They thought your quiet meant emptiness. Your patience meant fear. Your grace meant weakness. But in that very silence, you were rebuilding, reflecting, processing, leveling up in ways they couldn't see, in ways they could never understand. And beneath the calm, beneath the composure, was a resolve they could never measure. You weren't stuck. You weren't powerless. You were preparing. You were letting their chaos reveal itself while you quietly grew beyond their control. And it did. Now they see it. They see you thriving, smiling without their validation, living without their presence, and it unsettles them. The version of you they believed they could manipulate no longer exists. You've outgrown their cage, stopped justifying your worth, stopped waiting for them to recognize what they could never see, and they are left with the consequences. Not because you punished them, but because life did. Life always exposes narcissists. Life always balances what they thought they could take for granted. And now they feel the ache of what they threw away, the realization that the person they tried to control, discard, and exploit was, in truth, the strongest, rarest presence in their lives. They thought you were fragile, but you were unbreakable. They thought you were replaceable, but now they understand they lost someone irreplaceable. And you didn't raise your voice. You didn't chase them. Your silence, your distance, your grace, all of it spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. You never wasted your strength on the wrong person. And now, finally, they see the truth. They can't undo what they lost. They can't reclaim what they destroyed. And they will never again find the depth, loyalty, and integrity you embodied. You weren't interested in playing their games. You showed up with your heart open. You gave them honesty when it was inconvenient. You gave them patience when they didn't deserve it. You gave them your best self, and they took it for granted. But this isn't just an ordinary loss for them. This is a soul-level loss. Because when a narcissist encounters someone who sees them in their worst moments and still chooses to stay, someone who offers loyalty without condition, and they discard that person, the weight of that decision doesn't fade. It lingers. It clings to their identity. It becomes a shadow they can't outrun, a quiet voice that whispers in moments of loneliness, in moments of stillness. I let the best go. At the time, they convinced themselves they were choosing something better, something easier, something more exciting or more convenient. But now, nothing measures up. Every connection feels shallow, every new person feels fragile, every distraction, every new beginning, every attempt to recreate what they had with you fails. Because once they experienced authenticity, everything fake feels empty. They search for your qualities in others. They chase echoes of the person they lost. Maybe they pretend they've moved on, but deep down, the comparison is always there. A quiet, nagging realization that nothing, no one, can replace what they destroyed. They lost someone rare, someone real. You didn't just offer them love. You offered depth, understanding, stability. You held space for their chaos. You carried their pain without judgment. You believed in them when they couldn't believe in themselves. And they treated that like it was disposable. That is the cruelty of narcissists. They cannot recognize the value of genuine care until it's gone. Now they are haunted, not only by what they did, but by what they'll never have again. And the tragedy is they didn't see it until it was too late. That's the price of crossing someone with integrity. The cost doesn't show in the moment. It shows years later in the quiet, in the emptiness, in the gnawing realization that they burned the bridge to something irreplaceable. They remember your laugh, They remember your words. They remember the comfort of knowing someone had their back no matter what. And now they sit in silence, knowing they destroyed the very thing they claimed to value. Loyalty like yours doesn't come with conditions, and that's what made it powerful, but they couldn't see it at the time. Their ego, their immaturity, their short-sightedness blinded them. And now they are paying the price. Every day, with every failed connection, every hollow distraction, every attempt to reclaim validation from elsewhere. You didn't have to punish them. Life did. Life has a brutal way of teaching lessons that narcissists refuse to learn until it's too late. The moment they betrayed you, they separated themselves from the one person who saw the best in them, even when they were at their worst. No apology, no excuse, no rewrite of history can ever change that. You, on the other hand, carried the pain, but you also carried your integrity. You walked away, not with vengeance, but with dignity. And that is something they will never forget. Not because they miss what they had, but because they finally understand what they'll never get back: the connection, the safety, the honesty, the unwavering loyalty. That kind of bond doesn't grow on trees, it's rare, and they threw it away. Now they are left with a void. They are the ones searching for echoes of you and people who will never measure up. They're chasing ghosts, hoping to feel a fraction of what you once offered, and all they find is absence. They let go of something sacred. They destroyed something beautiful. And in doing so, they sentence themselves to a life where your absence is louder than any presence they try to fill it with. They lost you, and they will carry that loss forever. You, however, could have crumbled. No one would have blamed you, but you didn't. You healed, you rose, you thrived, and that is the final truth they can never escape. They thought they could control you, manipulate you, silence your power, but they were wrong. True strength isn't loud. It's the grace to endure, the courage to walk away, and the wisdom to protect your heart. You weren't broken by their games. You were refined. You didn't retaliate. You rose. Every step you take, every success, every moment of peace reflects what they lost and can never reclaim. They live with absence and emptiness, while you live with freedom, clarity, and dignity. You survived, you healed, you thrived, and that is the ultimate, undeniable victory.